Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And I am Adam.
Sort of a not fully intentional little hiatus here that we had some travel, we had some other stuff going on, but we are back today to talk about Wes Anderson's Roald Dahl adapted Netflix shorts, which we already got Asteroid City from him earlier in the year, and this isn't a feature-length project, but it almost is, really. I mean, we got four different shorts from Wes Anderson, one of them about 40 minutes long, and then three that are, 15, 17 minutes?
17 minutes. I mean, take out the credits and they're, 14, 15 minutes, so whatever.
So, I mean, it's not quite a feature, but the fact that one of them's long and there's four of them total, it's more than just dropping like one of these 17-minute things on there.
Sure.
And coming from Wes Anderson, who did like The French Dispatch, I could have totally seen these four kind of woven together as a movie released in theaters. Wouldn't have surprised me at all.
I was actually kind of expecting that, even with the way that Netflix released them as kind of their own separate things. Felt odd to me.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
once you're in one of them and you scroll down and you can see the Roald Dahl collection, then you can find them all. But the fact that they're not all bundled as like a season of something
is a little weird.
Feels really weird to me that they're just sort of scattered out there and you got to kind of go find them on your own.
Yeah.
But what we're going to do today is discuss all four of these shorts fairly quickly. And then at the end, we're each going to rank them, tell you which ones we like the best and which ones we like the least.
Yep.
So do we want to dive into this right now? Adam, do you have the descriptions for these up? This is a little different than our normal movie.
I do.
Thing.
See, I don't have all of them up. So yeah, throw them up.
So
I don't have all of them.
I say we start with The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, which is the longest one and kind of the one. This one played at Cannes, I think, or one of the film festivals. So, Dylan, do you want to tell the people what The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar is about?
This story follows Henry Sugar, who is able to see through objects and predict the future with the help of a book he stole. That's a decent description.
Yeah, basically he reads a story about a guy who can see without using his eyes. And being a bored rich guy, that the first thing that he thinks of is, I bet I could use this to make money.
And
Blackjack
specifically, or really any card game, and just being able to use his mind to see the numbers in the suit.
Yeah, and I thought this was really fun. One of the coolest things about this, I think, is that he's got kind of 5 main actors here.
Yeah.
And they each kind of are in roughly 3 of these. I think Ralph Fiennes is in all of them because he plays Roald Dahl himself, or kind of a version of him. But then Henry Sugar, Benedict Cumberbatch plays Henry Sugar, and then Dev Patel and Richard Ayoade play these 2 doctors, and Ben Kingsley plays the man who, what was his name? Imdad Khan, I believe. Who can see without using his eyes. And the fascinating thing with this, and why this one is kind of, I think, essential to start with, starting with any of the other ones would feel really weird, because this kind of introduces you to how this is going to work. And you see, and Fiennes kind of introduces himself basically as Roald Dahl, and you don't get that with the other ones. He kind of shows up at the end to wrap up the story. And if you watch one of the other ones first and then see him come in at the end, it's not really going to make any sense at all. Which is another reason why this should be bundled together, and it should have like a recommended order.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But it's fun to see them kind of bounce back and forth and play different characters. And then the actors, I think, are all great. This one, for me, it was a little jarring because it's told in a way of like somebody telling you a story. It's somebody looking at the camera, and they're basically all just reading the words from the pages of the book.
Yeah. It's like a book it's like a book on tape or an audiobook, but a visual audiobook.
Yeah.
But not a movie.
It's cool in some ways, because you kind of like the whole thing is very straightforward, that they're telling you a story.
Yeah.
There are people who like walk on and hand people props.
Yeah.
And then walk off. It's very interesting, but it's also just different than what you're expecting. And the length of this one got to me a little bit more than the other ones did. What did you guys think of this one?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Is I felt like the breaking the fourth wall, narrating along with you, but I'm also still acting in it thing. Certain times it was charming and it lends itself very well to Wes Anderson's style. But then there was other times where it just felt a little like, for example, it's like he's looking at you and he's like, this Dubba Dubba took the spoon off the shelf and handed it to me. Thank you, I said. You're welcome, he said. When it got to that point, I was like, okay, like I just felt like it's a little overindulgent, but it also, it makes sense that Wes Anderson would tell it this way, and if he loves Roald Dahl, he would want to, keep it as authentic as possible with the dialogue and what happens and whatnot. So I totally get it, and I agree that for me, it actually worked better with the shorter ones because I felt like right about the time it was starting to get to me, the story was over. This one is like it's like what 40 minutes long, so it definitely noticeably longer. So that's my opinion. I think you pretty much nailed it.
Yeah, I think the length got to me in the 40-minute one, but as far as the fourth wall breaking and kind of stuff we're talking about, it didn't really bother me. It's just different. It's kind of fun to see, and it's a new kind of, I wouldn't call it like a new medium because it's not audiobook, but it's not a movie. It's like a live action play sort of that's been filmed, which is it feels like it was a lot more interesting to do, like be an actor on set and be a part of it than it was to watch, but it was still interesting and fun. But yeah, the length of the 40-minute one, I was like, okay, like where are we going, what's going on? And then obviously that introduces you to that kind of style, so the shorter ones are easier to take.
Yeah, to your point, I think it was really fun how they would change the set around, like while the actors are still talking, as a character is walking towards the camera and talking behind him, you see people shuffling and moving sets, and now all of a sudden he's outside with trees. Like, that was really fun to watch. I bet that was really fun to pull off.
Yeah, all the transitions were cool. All the planning that must have gone in was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also just think this has to be really hard for an actor.
Absolutely, that's why it sounds so fun.
Like, they're talking to the camera the whole time, but then there's people in the room where they have to like slightly change directions, and it's all just kind of these long monologues.
Yeah.
And then there's also like they're walking away from the camera and like kind of guiding us along with them. But then they still got to keep talking like the entire time. And it's a fascinating exercise for an actor. And I thought it was really cool that these are all British actors. For this Roald Dahl stuff. I think that works really well. I thought Cumberbatch was phenomenal in these. I just got a kick every time we went to Ralph Fiennes as Roald Dahl in like his slippers and his little chair.
And cigarette and just his pad and just like
that stuff was all really fun. I do agree that the wonderful story of Henry Sugar was the one that I found the toughest to not necessarily get into, but kind of stay connected to.
Yeah.
Just because it is just kind of one person after another, just like basically talking to you. And so I struggled with that one a little bit. So what was the second one? The second one that I watched was The Swan, but Dylan, what do you got?
I was just going to say real quick before moving on, this is might be a little controversial, but I found Cumberbatch to be a little jarring doing the Wes Anderson style. And out of the main actors that are in each one, I feel like I wasn't as impressed or blown away by him.
Interesting.
He felt a little out of place to me in this, or just not like he was bringing anything that I didn't expect. Like, if I think, okay, Cumberbatch is going to do the Wes Anderson thing, it was pretty much what I was expected. It isn't like when Fiennes does it or when Kingsley does it and it seems to elevate it to this extra like thing. For him, at least for me, it felt like he kind of just delivered the lines, and I don't know.
Well, we'll get to the maybe my favorite. I don't know. We'll get to Poison eventually.
I liked him in Poison a lot more.
Yeah. So what do you have next?
Let's move on to The Swan.
Okay. So The Swan. Do you have the description up for that one?
So I pulled him up as well.
A small, brilliant boy is tormented by two large, idiotic bullies.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And this is mostly Rupert Friend, who we did not mention earlier. And he is in the other ones, but this one is pretty much all him.
Yeah.
So I'll go first since I'm already on a roll. This one was my favorite.
Okay.
For some reason, it just felt the story, and I was way more engaged in it right away. Just kind of a classic bully in a kid story. I love what Rupert Friend was doing, where he was doing different voices for the two bullies, and we never meet them. He just does the voices like as he would remember it, and that really required some impressive acting and memorization, like you said, long monologues where he's walking and doing a lot. And then it felt like to me the stakes were higher, and I won't give it away, but the two kind of things that the bullies make him do or force him to, I genuinely was like, oh, like what is going to happen? Like, oh my God, like I can't believe this is actually going to happen. And because the stakes were higher and I felt the tension, the comedy that's interspersed and kind of his weird thing he was doing was just working for me. I was really fascinated by the Swan, and it was my favorite start to finish.
Okay, that's yeah, I mean, I thought Rupert Friend was phenomenal. I totally agree with you on like the voices are fun. It was a very interesting choice to just have the kid kind of following him around,
Yeah,
but not really doing anything.
And then the twist, which we also won't give away, but kind of midway, the little twist reveal.
Yeah, but then because you just eventually expect the kid to do these things, but then like Rupert Friend is the one who lays down. He was the one who laid down on the railroad tracks, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
That was fascinating. These felt a lot like Stephen King bullies.
Yes, very much
And it's also just amazing how we don't see them ever.
Right?
Yeah.
We get told that they have a gun. Yeah.
And you can just see and feel all of it. And after kind of the length of Henry Sugar to go into the Swan, and I was kind of like, okay, I guess we'll see how this next one goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought this one was incredibly entertaining and just sort of really fresh.
Yeah.
And just reminded me how there's a lot of creepy stuff that happens in Roald Dahl stories.
Yeah,
that are sort of wrapped. They're sort of candy coated. A lot of his stories are just kind of like Willy Wonka himself, as the way Gene Wilder portrays him, where there's just this dark underbelly.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of that side of Roald Dahl and brought me back into that part of his world or worlds, something like The Witches. I thought this one was great.
Yeah, I think my favorite part of this one is the sets and like when they open, they're walking down like the path with all of the hedges.
Yeah,
and then later on, it's like a bunch of wheat and stuff that they're always walking through. And like, and part of that, they're like when they have to hand one of the actors something, like a little door opens like in half of the wheat. Like, oh, we just put a window here, open that, handed them something, took something back, and just like closed it. And we're like, okay, we're going. And like that was really fun, and watching all that, and then seeing how they did some of the later stuff in that short. The tree, the Swan itself. I thought that was neat. Yeah, I like this one. I also watched this one last, so because like the order I watched these in was a little. It
was actually last for me as well.
I watched this one second.
Okay, interesting. All right, should we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
All right, the next one we're gonna do the Ratcatcher.
Okay. Yes.
The Ratcatcher. In an English village, a reporter and a mechanic listen to a ratcatcher explain his clever plan to outwit his prey.
And this one, Richard Ayoade and Rupert Friend play two guys running shops kind of along the same street. They're right next to each other, and there are rats that they're having problems with. So enter the Ratcatcher, played by Ray Fiennes.
Brilliantly portrayed by Ray Fiennes.
Yeah, this is
incredible.
Like this is his best role. Like
this made
so
me
good.
You haven't seen Budapest Hotel yet, Adam? Yeah. Which we will.
I have seen it.
Oh, have you?
I haven't watched it since like getting into Wes Anderson. So it was like kind of my first, and I was like, I think it's funny, but I don't think it's like the best. You know what I mean? Like, you rewatch them, they get more valuable or whatever.
This also just made me think like he totally could have played Peter Pettigrew.
Oh, for sure.
Oh,
I mean, it's basically him. It's incredible.
To catch a rat, you got to think like a rat and act like a rat. And Ray Fiennes definitely
like
does
a rat,
that.
Dressed
and like
like a
right
rat.
away,
He's
just
like a rat.
What he's wearing and like his facial expression. Somehow he made his eyes beady. Like he doesn't have beady eyes, and yet he made his own eyes beady. And I like he was stealing every scene.
His little like he's got like a little hunch too, and he walks sort of like, I mean, because they explain this. That's part of the part of the narration that Richard Ayoade is doing in this one. Oh, he walks and his footsteps don't make sound, and he just like his knees are always slightly bent, and you see him like slowly walk up, and you're like, oh, okay, he's like killing it. Like,
Yeah.
It's fun to like hear it and then see it like right away. Like, oh, that's what you mean. Like, you know, instead of when you're reading a book and you're putting it together in your mind, you're like, oh, okay, I don't know. When you're a kid, like, I don't know what beady eyes is, so whatever. Like, you get to actually see what the author meant in real time, which is, I think, fun.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I'm glad you mentioned Richard Ayoade here because I love his reactions to Ratcatcher. They're essential to the success of this story, I think. Like, he's the one telling us this story, I believe, right? It's not
yeah, he's the editor in this one.
Yeah, Ayoade's the narrator in this one. And it's just perfect. Like, he keeps, I think my dad said something about when we were watching, oh my God, our favorite Halloween miniseries, Over the Garden Wall, one time, where he said, like, this show has a way of constantly saying what I'm thinking within like 5 seconds of me thinking it. And that's how I felt about Ayoade in this one, where he's just like, you're watching the Ratcatcher and you're like, that's weird. And then he turns to the camera, he's like, I thought this was weird.
Yeah.
And, you know, more specifics in certain scenarios, but
and I
thought this one was great.
I love the couple times too where he's like, he'll say something and then he's like, the Ratcatcher was not amused with what I had to say. He gets in his face. Like, great stuff. Yeah, he was great as the narrator.
Yeah.
And then we got a little stop motion rat thing.
Yeah,
which I kind of wish we had gotten more. Like, I wanted to see that ferret rat battle under the shirt.
I was gonna say
with like his Isle of Dogs, like cotton ball smoke coming out.
I was expecting some of that stuff. I was expecting some of that stuff because they did a lot of pantomiming. There's like
what do you think of the pantomime?
It didn't sell me right away because a lot of the other ones they have a stagehand who will hand the actor something and they'll be like, oh, it's just like a little wooden bird or it's a something just to stand in. And this one he was just like, I've got this rat, like his head's right here. I've got this ferret, and they're gonna fight. And it's like, you're not holding anything, dude. Like, what are we doing?
I think it added to the quirkiness or just like how uncomfortable this Ratcatcher guy can make you feel, though, and how he's kind of living in his own little world. I think that's why it works.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, and you don't want to see like the blood and the gore and the whatever. Like, you want to see the fight, right? But you don't want to see the actual like aftermath necessarily. So that it lets your imagination do all the work for you.
Absolutely.
And then after he pulls out the not animatronic, the stop motion rat, and you're like, oh, so this is what a rat would look like in this universe. You've already done all the fun stuff in your head. You've already made it up and made it as cool as you wanted it to be. And then you get the thing that that he's about to do. So I think that was a fun little like tweak to the story because it again, like a book, it just allows you to kind of sit in your own imagination rather than showing you every single thing.
Yep,
for sure.
Totally agreed.
All right, and on to the last one.
On to the next one.
All right, going to end with Poison.
So we talked about these in the exact order in which I watched them.
Interesting.
Wrapped it up with Poison. So Dylan, what is Poison about?
When a poisonous snake slithers onto an Englishman's stomach in India, his associate and a doctor race to save him.
So I gotta say, this was one of the most just tension-filled things that I've seen in a very long time.
15 minutes I've had in the last 2 weeks. Like,
I mean, the concept here I think is phenomenal for a short story.
Yeah,
the guy walks home and this dude's being a little weird and laying down in his bed, and then you get closer and there's a poisonous snake on his stomach, and instantly everybody just understands. Like, oh, he can't move because he'll die, and how do we help him? And now it's kind of, your mind starts racing. What do we do? I thought Dev Patel, the acting in Poison, I think collectively might be the best. It's hard to say, though, because the acting in all of this is phenomenal. But Dev Patel talking a million miles per hour.
Yeah, he was really
sweating
and Cumberbatch just laying on the bed here,
sweating bullets.
Can't move. He's getting ornery.
Yeah, he's starting to lose
mad, and he's just like Cumberbatch here was also just phenomenal.
Yeah, I liked him a lot more in this than as Henry Sugar. I just felt like and when he's
Henry
starting to
Sugar
break.
just felt like Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
because
that's
he's
a
just
good
kind
way
of
to
an
put it.
asshole. Like, and that's
Well, he's just. I don't know.
because he's
You're
like
not
he's
too
using
far
that
from,
he's
like,
using that skill to
the
get
shtick
ahead.
isn't too far from the Doctor Strange shtick.
That's
kind
what
of
I mean.
the
I was just
condescending
And we've seen him play
that's why I said
Sherlock.
asshole.
and
Yeah.
Sherlock.
It's
Yeah,
very
but yeah,
similar.
this was something else. And yeah, this one definitely had my attention. To your point, Nate, like the stakes, kind of like in the Swan. What I liked about it, these stakes felt real. It felt like, oh yeah, Roald Dahl, kind of the darker side. You know, it's not all just fun, cuddly, old British, old timey aesthetic.
Right.
Yeah.
This made me want Wes Anderson to direct like a horror movie.
I want Wes Anderson to redo James and the Giant Peach.
Yeah, I mean that seems right up his alley for
Be
sure.
a lot of fun to watch another Roald Dahl adaptation, but like a live, like full movie. Like that'd be fun.
And I felt like this one too. Obviously you have Dev Patel doing the narration, which is he's doing it in the classic Wes Anderson style. I mean, the whole thing is done in that way, but Cumberbatch and the situation and the plot made it feel almost removed from the Wes Anderson aesthetic. Like it felt more like, you know what, we're just like, anyone could have directed this, because like the one guy isn't talking, or when he does, he's like freaking out, and the other people are talking fast because they're trying to stay calm, but it's like an emergency. So that one felt like you could almost sneak that past someone who didn't know it was directed by Wes Anderson, almost.
A
If
little
it wasn't
bit.
if it wasn't for a few of the Dev Patel stuff, and then the ending with Ray Fine again. But
Yeah. Or Kingsley.
Mhm.
I was trying to not rewatch this, but check something out at the end of this one. So I restarted it and then, just scrolled straight through it. And it was remarkable to see like how the framing doesn't really change. Like, obviously that's kind of Wes Anderson's thing where it's always like centralized and
symmetrical.
Symmetrical and stuff. But to get through that, like to just scroll, all the way to the end. So very quick, like, 10 seconds or something. Only a couple times does the thing actually change. Everything is so square and
In
so
that
like,
room.
especially in that room, you always get Benedict Cumberbatch like in the middle of the frame and just being like, and so you just like like 2
That's the
seconds of that
poster,
while you
too.
scroll. It's perfect. It's a that is like, oh, if you scroll quickly through it, that's Wes Anderson, but otherwise you don't really notice it as much as you're saying.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I think this one was my least favorite though.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay. I might know why, but we're not going to discuss the ending.
Yeah.
We can get into that now. I mean, we were each gonna
we were gonna
all
rank
of
them.
these at the end, kind of part of the point of all of this. Are we all? Well, I guess not with Adam. I guess I'll go first.
Okay, you go
my
first.
least favorite was The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, just due to the length and the nature on how these were made. It just felt like the shorter time frame fit this style and what he was doing here far better, where I just kind of eventually got bored with Henry Sugar. It just felt like it was too long. Number 3 for me is The Swan, but there's like the 3 17-minute ones are all very, very close. These I will absolutely revisit probably numerous times. I doubt if I'll revisit The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar again.
I would trade The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar for 2 more 17-minute long ones.
Yeah.
Instead of that one 40-minute long one.
It's an interesting story. It just does drag in the middle or like towards the end. The last like 10 minutes, you're like, oh, I thought we were done. But yeah.
And then, God, number 1 and number 2 for me, I enjoyed the Ratcatcher the most, I think, while I was watching it. But there's something about the way that Poison ends with, I think there's a little more heft to that story with some PTSD stuff. And I don't know, they all just, all 3 of the shorter ones just work so well. But I think I'd probably put Poison number 2 and the Ratcatcher number 1, just for the comedy of the Ratcatcher.
Yeah.
Nice. I'll go next. Yeah, I'm going to go The Swan number 1. As I said before, I just think it captured me the most. It kind of felt like you're saying the darker side, and even kind of like I don't know, just almost like Harry Potter-esque in a way. It just kind of took everything down to just like a kid's story. Bullies, smart kid who's getting bullied, getting pushed around, and the bullies are taking it too far. Like, that's always, I don't know, that just felt, and maybe it was because I watched it right after Henry Sugar, and I was kind of a little bit like, all right, and this felt fresh and different, to your point. But yeah, no. So I would go Swan number 1, The Ratcatcher number 2 for its comedy, and Ray Fiennes as the Ratcatcher. Poison right behind it at number 3, just fantastic. Benedict Cumberbatch, and then I agree, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, the last.
All right. So
Mhm.
I'm a little bit different.
Uh-huh.
My least favorite one was Poison, which I don't really know why. I mean, I suspect some things, and it's not to do with the end. It's like the way things go down. If I can say that without being
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
without
yeah.
revealing anything. But I did really enjoy that one. And again, all the 17-minute ones are so much easier. They're so much more digestible.
Yeah.
Than the other one. But I did enjoy The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. That was my number 3. Just because I thought it was a very interesting, like they explain the method to doing this, which like you don't usually get in movies or something. They're just like, ooh, well, you just do this thing, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. And now they've got the secret, or they've
you've been working
power
on it for the last 3 days, is what you're telling us.
Yeah. So I enjoyed it. I liked how it ended. And then my number 2 was The Swan. As Dylan was saying, it's the most like childlike.
Yeah.
In its telling, which is the magic of Roald Dahl. Like, a lot of his stories are in that fashion. Think Holes, that kind of thing. They're all kind of that perspective. And then The Ratcatcher was my favorite. It was the ending in its tone is very interesting. And I really just enjoyed all the acting all the way around when the Ratcatcher, or when Ralph Fiennes is showing them like, oh, you got to think like a rat. So you, instead of like just putting out this poison that would get washed away, you would create a contraption,
real grain.
Yeah, and like that kind of stuff. And that was like, ooh, okay, look at him do these things, and him just being like really mousy and really like, he's got these long fingers with his gross nails and all that stuff. He was such a ball of his own creation.
He's fantastic. Really, it's worth checking out just for his performance. Seriously.
Yeah. And again, they're only 15 minutes. So like, if you're like, oh, that was strange, like, cool, it was 15 minutes. It doesn't matter. Exactly. Like watching a YouTube video or something, like, so yeah, that was mine.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, this was fun. Whose turn is it to put a wrap on the show?
I've got it this time.
All right. Take it away.
Something extremely unpleasant was about to happen. I was sure of that. Something sinister and cruel, but I had to see it now.